Chapter 5. "These children," said Cousin Betty, looking at Hortense as she went up to her, "fancy that no one but themselves can have lovers." "Listen," Hortense replied, finding herself alone with her cousin. "If you prove to me that Wenceslas is not a pure invention, I will give you my yellow cashmere shawl." "He is a count." "Every Pole is a count." "But he is not a Pole. He comes from Lithuania? No, Livonia? Yes, that's it. But what is his name?" "I wonder if you are capable of keeping a secret." "Cousin Betty, I will be as mute—" "As a fish?" "As a fish." "By your life eternal?" "By my life eternal." "No, by your happiness in this world?" "Yes." "Well, then, his name is Wenceslas Steinbock." "One of Charles II's generals was named Steinbock." "He was his granduncle. His own father settled in Livonia after the death of the King of Sweden, but he lost all his fortune during the campaign of 1812, and died, leaving the poor boy at the age of 8 without a penny. The Grand Duke Constantine, for the honor of the name of Steinbock, took him under his protection and sent him to school." "I will not break my word," Hortense replied. "Prove his existence, and you shall have the yellow shawl. The color is most becoming to dark skins." "And you will keep my secret?" "And tell you mine." "Well, then, the next time I come, you shall have the proof." "But the proof will be the lover," said Hortense. Cousin Betty, who, since her first arrival in Paris, had been bitten by a mania for shawls, was bewitched by the idea of owning the yellow cashmere given to his wife by the Baron in 1808, and handed down from mother to daughter, after the manner of some families, in 1830. The shawl had been a good deal worn 10 years ago, but the costly object, now always kept in its sandalwood box, seemed to the old maid ever new, like the drawing-room furniture. So she brought, in her handbag, a present for the Baroness's birthday, by which she proposed to prove the existence of her romantic lover. This present was a silver seal, formed of 3 little figures, back to back, wreathed with foliage and supporting the globe. They represented faith, hope, and charity. Their feet rested on monsters rending each other, among them the symbolical serpent. In 1846, now that such immense strides have been made in the art of which Benvenuto Cellini was the master, by Mademoiselle de Fauveau, Wagner, Janet, Froment Meurice, and woodcarvers like Liénard, this little masterpiece would amaze nobody, but at that time a girl who understood the silversmith's art stood astonished as she held the seal which Lisbeth put into her hands, saying, "There, what do you think of that?" In design, attitude, and drapery, the figures were of the school of Raphael, but the execution was in the style of the Florentine metalworkers, the school created by Donatello, Brunelleschi, Ghiberti, Benvenuto Cellini, John of Bologna, and others. The French masters of the Renaissance had never invented more strangely twining monsters than these that symbolized the evil passions. The palms, ferns, reeds, and foliage that wreathed the virtues showed a style, a taste, a handling that might have driven a practised craftsman to despair. A scroll floated above the 3 figures, and on its surface, between the heads, were a W, a chamois, and the word "Fake it." "Who carved this?" asked Hortense. "Well, just my lover," replied Lisbeth. "There are 10 months' work in it. I could earn more at making sword knots. He told me that Steinbock means a rock goat, a chamois in German, and he intends to mark all his work in that way. Aha! I shall have the shawl." "What for?" "Do you suppose I could buy such a thing, or order it? Impossible. Well, then, it must have been given to me. And who would make me such a present? A lover." Hortense, with an artfulness that would have frightened Lisbeth Fischer if she had detected it, took care not to express all her admiration, though she was full of the delight which every soul that is open to a sense of beauty must feel on seeing a faultless piece of work, perfect and unexpected." "On my word," said she, "it is very pretty." "Yes, it is pretty," said her cousin, "but I like an orange-colored shawl better." "Well, child, my lover spends his time in doing such work as that. Since he came to Paris, he has turned out 3 or 4 little trifles in that style, and that is the fruit of 4 years' study and toil. He has served as apprentice to founders, metal casters, and goldsmiths. There he has paid away thousands and hundreds of francs, and my gentleman tells me that in a few months now he will be famous and rich." "Then you often see him?" "Bless me, do you think it is all a fable? I told you truth in jest." "And he is in love with you?" asked Hortense eagerly. "He adores me," replied Lisbeth very seriously. "You see, child, he had never seen any women but the washed-out pale things they all are in the North, and a slender, brown, youthful thing like me warmed his heart. But, mum, you promised, you know." "And he will fare like the 5 others," said the girl ironically as she looked at the seal. "6 others, miss. I left one in Lorraine, who to this day would fetch the moon down for me." "This one does better than that," said Hortense. "He has brought down the sun." "Where can that be turned into money?" asked her cousin. "It takes wide lands to benefit by the sunshine." These witticisms, fired in quick retort, and leading to the sort of giddy play that may be imagined, had given cause for the laughter which had added to the Baroness's troubles by making her compare her daughter's future lot with the present, when she was free to indulge the light-heartedness of youth. "But to give you a gem which cost him 6 months of work, he must be under some great obligations to you," said Hortense, in whom the silver seal had suggested very serious reflections. "Oh, you want to know too much at once," said her cousin. "But listen, I will let you into a little plot." "Is your lover in it, too?" "Oh, you want so much to see him. But as you may suppose, an old maid like Cousin Betty, who had managed to keep a lover for 5 years, keeps him well hidden. Now, just let me alone. You see, I have neither cat nor canary, nor dog nor a parrot, and the old nanny goat wanted something to pet and tease, so I treated myself to a Polish count." "Has he a moustache?" "As long as that," said Lisbeth, holding up her shuttle filled with gold thread. She always took her lace-work with her, and worked till dinner was served. "If you ask too many questions, you will be told nothing," she went on. "You are but 22, and you chatter more than I do, though I am 42, not to say 43. "I am listening. I am a wooden image," said Hortense. "My lover has finished a bronze group 10 inches high," Lisbeth went on. "It represents Samson slaying a lion, and he has kept it buried till it is so rusty that you might believe it to be as old as Samson himself. This fine piece is shown at the shop of one of the old curiosity sellers on the Place du Carrousel, near my lodgings. Now, your father knows Monsieur Popinot, the Minister of Commerce and Agriculture, and the Comte de Rastignac, and if he would mention the group to them as a fine antique he had seen by chance, it seems that such things take the fancy of your grand folks who don't care so much about gold lace, and that my man's fortune would be made if one of them would buy or even look at the wretched piece of metal. The poor fellow is sure that it might be mistaken for old work, and that the rubbish is worth a great deal of money. And then, if one of the ministers should purchase the group, he would go to pay his respects and prove that he was the maker, and be almost carried in triumph. Oh, he believes he has reached the pinnacle. Poor young man, and he is as proud as 2 newly made counts. Michelangelo over again. But for a lover he has kept his head on his shoulders," said Hortense. "And how much does he want for it?" 1,500 francs. The dealer will not let it go for less, since he must make his commission." "Papa is in the king's household just now," said Hortense. "He sees those 2 ministers every day at the Chamber, and he will do the thing, I undertake that. You will be a rich woman, Madame la Comtesse de Steinbach." "No, the boy is too lazy. For whole weeks he sits twiddling with bits of red wax, and nothing comes of it. Why, he spends all his days at the Louvre and the library, looking at prints and sketching things. He is an idler." The cousins chatted and giggled, Hortense laughing a forced laugh, for she was invaded by a kind of love which every girl has gone through, the love of the unknown, love in its vaguest form, when every thought is accreted round some form which is suggested by a chance word, as the efflorescence of hoar frost gathers about a straw that the wind has blown against the window-sill. For the past 10 months she had made a reality of her cousin's imaginary romance, believing, like her mother, that Lisbeth would never marry, and now, within a week, this visionary being had become Comte Wenceslas Steinbock. The dream had a certificate of birth. The wraith had solidified into a young man of 30. The seal she held in her hand, a sort of annunciation in which genius shone like an imminent light, had the powers of a talisman. Hortense felt such a surge of happiness that she almost doubted whether the tale were true. There was a ferment in her blood, and she laughed wildly to deceive her cousin. "But I think the drawing-room door is open," said Lisbeth. "Let us go and see if Monsieur Crevel is gone." "Mamma has been very much out of spirits these 2 days. I suppose the marriage under discussion has come to nothing." "Oh, it may come on again. He is, I may tell you so much, a councillor of the Supreme Court. How would you like to be Madame la Présidente? If Monsieur Crevel has a finger in it, he will tell me about it if I ask him. I shall know by tomorrow if there is any hope." "Leave the seal with me," said Hortense. "I will not show it. Mamma's birthday is not for a month yet. I will give it to you that morning." "No, no, give it back to me. It must have a case." "But I will let papa see it, that he may know what he is talking about to the ministers, for men in authority must be careful what they say," urged the girl. "Well, do not show it to your mother, that is all I ask, for if she believed I had a lover, she would make game of me." "I promise." The cousins reached the drawing-room just as the Baroness turned faint. Her daughter's cry of alarm recalled her to herself. Lisbeth went off to fetch some salts. When she came back, she found the mother and daughter in each other's arms, the Baroness soothing her daughter's fears and saying, "It was nothing, a little nervous attack. There is your father," she added, recognizing the Baron's way of ringing the bell. "Say not a word to him." Adeline rose and went to meet her husband, intending to take him into the garden and talk to him till dinner should be served of the difficulties about the proposed match, getting him to come to some decision as to the future, and trying to hint at some warning advice. Baron Hector Hulot came in a dress at once lawyer-like and Napoleonic, for imperial men, men who had been attached to the Emperor, were easily distinguishable by their military deportment, their blue coats with gilt buttons, buttoned to the chin, their black silk stock, and an authoritative demeanour acquired from a habit of command in circumstances requiring despotic rapidity. There was nothing of the old man in the Baron, it must be admitted. His sight was still so good that he could read without spectacles. His handsome oval face, framed in whiskers that were indeed too black, showed a brilliant complexion, ruddy with the veins that characterize a sanguine temperament, and his stomach, kept in order by a belt, had not exceeded the limits of the majestic, as Brillat-Savarin says. A fine aristocratic air and great affability served to conceal the libertine with whom Crevel had had such high times. He was one of those men whose eyes always light up at the sight of a pretty woman, even of such as merely pass by, never to be seen again. "Have you been speaking, my dear?" asked Adeline, seeing him with an anxious brow. "No," replied Hector, "but I am worn out with hearing others speak for 2 hours without coming to a vote. They carry on a war of words, in which their speeches are like a cavalry charge which has no effect on the enemy. Talk has taken the place of action, which goes very much against the grain of men who are accustomed to marching orders, as I said to the Marshal when I left him. However, I have enough of being bored on the minister's bench. Here I may play. "How do, la chèvre? Good morning, little kid." And he took his daughter round the neck, kissed her, and made her sit on his knee, resting her head on his shoulder, that he might feel her soft golden hair against his cheek. "He is tired and worried," said his wife to herself. "I shall only worry him more. I will wait." "Are you going to be at home this evening?" she asked him. "No, children. After dinner I must go out. If it had not been the day when Lisbeth and the children and my brother come to dinner, you would not have seen me at all." The Baroness took up the newspaper, looked down the list of theatres, and laid it down again when she had seen that Robert le Diable was to be given at the Opera. Josepha, who had left the Italian opera 6 months since for the French opera, was to take the part of Alice. This little pantomime did not escape the Baron, who looked hard at his wife. Adeline cast down her eyes and went out into the garden. Her husband followed her. "Come, what is it, Adeline?" said he, putting his arm round her waist and pressing her to his side. "Do not you know that I love you more than—" "More than Jenny Cadine or Josepha?" said she, boldly interrupting him. "Who put that into your head?" exclaimed the Baron, releasing his wife and starting back a step or two. "I got an anonymous letter, which I burnt at once, in which I was told, my dear, that the reason Hortense's marriage was broken off was the poverty of our circumstances. Your wife, my dear Hector, would never have said a word. She knew of your connection with Jenny Cadine, and did she ever complain? But as the mother of Hortense, I am bound to speak the truth." Hulot, after a short silence, which was terrible to his wife, whose heart beat loud enough to be heard, opened his arms, clasped her to his heart, kissed her forehead, and said with the vehemence of enthusiasm, "Adeline, you are an angel, and I am a wretch." "No, no," cried the Baroness, hastily laying her hand upon his lips to hinder him from speaking evil of himself. "Yes, for I have not at this moment a sou to give to Hortense, and I am most unhappy. But since you open your heart to me, I may pour into it the trouble that is crushing me. Your Uncle Fischer is in difficulties, and it is I who dragged him there, for he has accepted bills for me to the amount of 25,000 francs. And all for a woman who deceives me, who laughs at me behind my back, and calls me an old dyed Tom. It is frightful. A vice which costs me more than it would to maintain a family, and I cannot resist. I would promise you here and now never to see that abominable Jewess again, but if she wrote me 2 lines, I should go to her, as we marched into fire under the Emperor." "Do not be so distressed," cried the poor woman in despair, but forgetting her daughter, as she saw the tears in her husband's eyes. "There are my diamonds. Whatever happens, save my uncle." "Your diamonds are worth scarcely 20,000 francs nowadays. That would not be enough for old Fischer, so keep them for Hortense. I will see the Marshal to-morrow." "My poor dear," said the Baroness, taking her Hector's hands and kissing them. This was all the scolding he got. Adeline sacrificed her jewels, the father made them a present to Hortense. She regarded this as a sublime action, and she was helpless. "He is the master. He could take everything, and he leaves me my diamonds. He is divine." This was the current of her thoughts, and indeed the wife had gained more by her sweetness than another perhaps could have achieved by a fit of angry jealousy. The moralist cannot deny that, as a rule, well-bred though very wicked men are far more attractive and lovable than virtuous men. Having crimes to atone for, they crave indulgence by anticipation, by being lenient to the shortcomings of those who judge them, and they are thought most kind. Though there are no doubt some charming people among the virtuous, virtue considers itself fair enough, unadorned, to be at no pains to please, and then all really virtuous persons, for the hypocrites do not count, have some slight doubts as to their position. They believe that they are cheated in the bargain of life on the whole, and they indulge in acid comments after the fashion of those who think themselves unappreciated. Hence the Baron, who accused himself of ruining his family, displayed all his charm of wit and his most seductive graces for the benefit of his wife, for his children, and his cousin Lisbeth. Then, when his son arrived with Célestine, Crevel's daughter, who was nursing the infant Hulot, he was delightful to his daughter-in-law, loading her with compliments, a treat to which Célestine's vanity was little accustomed, for no moneyed bride more commonplace or more utterly insignificant was ever seen. The grandfather took the baby from her, kissed it, declared it was a beauty and a darling. He spoke to it in baby language, prophesied that it would grow to be taller than himself, insinuated compliments for his son's benefit, and restored the child to the Normandy nurse who had charge of it. Célestine, on her part, gave the Baroness a look as much as to say, "What a delightful man!" and she naturally took her father-in-law's part against her father. After thus playing the charming father-in-law and the indulgent grandpapa, the Baron took his son into the garden and laid before him a variety of observations, full of good sense, as to the attitude to be taken up by the Chamber on a certain ticklish question which had that morning come under discussion. The young lawyer was struck with admiration for the depth of his father's insight, touched by his cordiality, and especially by the deferential tone which seemed to place the two men on a footing of equality. Monsieur Hulot junior was in every respect the young Frenchman, as he has been moulded by the Revolution of 1830, his mind infatuated with politics, respectful of his own hopes, and concealing them under an affectation of gravity, very envious of successful men, making sententiousness do the duty of witty rejoinders, the gems of the French language, with a high sense of importance, and mistaking arrogance for dignity. Such men are walking coffins, each containing a Frenchman of the past. Now and again the Frenchman wakes up and kicks against his English-made casing, but ambition stifles him, and he submits to be smothered. The coffin is always covered with black cloth. "Ah, here is my brother," said Baron Hulot, going to meet the Count at the drawing-room door. Having greeted the probable successor of the late Marshal Montcornet, he led him forward by the arm with every show of affection and respect. The older man, a member of the Chamber of Peers, but excused from attendance on account of his deafness, had a handsome head, chilled by age, but with enough grey hair still to be marked in a circle by the pressure of his hat. He was short, square, and shrunken, but carried his hale old age with a free and easy air, and as he was full of excessive activity, which had now no purpose, he divided his time between reading and taking exercise. In a drawing-room he devoted his attention to waiting on the wishes of the ladies. "You are very merry here," said he, seeing that the Baron shed a spirit of animation on the little family gathering. "And yet Hortense is not married," he added, noticing a trace of melancholy on his sister-in-law's countenance. "That will come all in good time," Lisbeth shouted in his ear in a formidable voice. "So there you are, you wretched seedling that could never blossom," said he, laughing. The hero of Pforzheim rather liked Cousin Betty, for there were certain points of resemblance between them. A man of the ranks, without any education, his courage had been the sole mainspring of his military promotion, and sound sense had taken the place of brilliancy. Of the highest honor, and clean-handed, he was ending a noble life in full contentment in the centre of his family, which claimed all his affections, and without a suspicion of his brother's still undiscovered misconduct. No one enjoyed more than he the pleasing sight of this family party, where there never was the smallest disagreement, for the brothers and sisters were all equally attached, Célestine having been at once accepted as one of the family. But the worthy little Count wondered now and then why Monsieur Crevel never joined the party. "Papa is in the country," Célestine shouted, and it was explained to him that the ex-perfumer was away from home. This perfect union of all her family made Madame Hulot say to herself, This, after all, is the best kind of happiness, and who can deprive us of it? The general, on seeing his favorite Adeline, the object of her husband's attentions, laughed so much about it that the Baron, fearing to seem ridiculous, transferred his gallantries to his daughter-in-law, who at these family dinners was always the object of his flattery and kind care, for he hoped to win Crevel back through her, and make him forego his resentment. Anyone seeing this domestic scene would have found it hard to believe that the father was at his wits' end, the mother in despair, the son anxious beyond words as to his father's future fate, and the daughter on the point of robbing her cousin of her lover.